The War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells, humanity's first alien invasion. The War of the Worlds is more than just a classic science fiction novel. It is a groundbreaking work that created the template for every alien invasion story that followed and forced Victorian readers to confront uncomfortable truths about human vulnerability, imperial arrogance, and our place in the universe. Written by H.G. Wells and published in 1898, this novel imagines Martians arriving in England with vastly superior technology, treating humans with the same casual brutality that European colonizers showed toward indigenous peoples around the world. Through the eyes of an unnamed narrator fleeing the Martian onslaught, Wells created a vision of apocalypse that feels terrifyingly real, combining scientific plausibility with visceral horror. Today, The War of the Worlds remains one of the most influential science fiction novels ever written, inspiring countless books, films, television shows, and even causing mass panic when adapted for radio in 1938. To understand The War of the Worlds, we must understand both H.G. Wells and the world he lived in. By 1898, Wells had already established himself as a master of scientific romance with The Time Machine, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and The Invisible Man. These works combined scientific speculation with social criticism, using fantastical scenarios to examine real problems in Victorian society. Wells was deeply concerned with social justice, evolution, and the future of humanity. He had studied biology under Thomas Huxley, Darwin's advocate, and understood evolutionary theory's implications. He knew that humans were not the pinnacle of creation, but simply another species shaped by natural selection, as vulnerable to extinction as the dinosaurs or dodo. This scientific perspective shapes The War of the Worlds profoundly. The Victorian Britain of 1898 was at the height of the British Empire. Britain controlled vast territories across the globe, ruling over millions of people in India, Africa, Australia, and elsewhere. The British saw themselves as the most advanced civilization on Earth, bringing progress and order to supposedly backward peoples. However, this imperial project involved tremendous violence, exploitation, and suffering for the colonized peoples. Wells was critical of imperialism and saw its moral problems clearly. In The War of the Worlds, he reverses the situation, imagining Britain itself being colonized by a vastly superior power. The Martians treat the British exactly as the British treated the indigenous peoples they conquered, showing no mercy and viewing humans as inferior beings to be exterminated or exploited. This reversal makes the novel a powerful critique of imperialism and human arrogance. The novel begins with one of the most famous opening passages in science fiction. Wells writes that no one in the early years of the 20th century would have believed that Earth was being watched by intelligences greater than man's, yet as mortal as his own. That as men busied themselves with their concerns, they were being scrutinized and studied as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize creatures in a drop of water. This opening immediately establishes the cosmic perspective that makes the novel so unsettling. Humans are not the center of the universe or the most important beings in creation. We are as insignificant to the Martians as microbes are to us. This was a radical and disturbing idea for Victorian readers who had been taught that humans were made in God's image and were the crown of creation. The story is told by an unnamed narrator, a philosopher and writer living in the suburbs of London. This choice of narrator is significant. He is educated and thoughtful, able to observe and analyze what is happening while also experiencing genuine fear and desperation. His perspective allows Wells to combine scientific speculation about the Martians and their technology with human emotional response to catastrophe. The narrator is not a hero in any traditional sense. He does not fight the Martians or save others. He simply tries to survive and understand what is happening. This makes him more realistic and relatable than a conventional adventure hero would be. The invasion begins almost casually. Astronomers observe explosions on Mars, visible through telescopes. These are the Martians launching their invasion cylinders toward Earth. Though no one realizes this at the time, the first cylinder lands on Horsell Common, near the town of Woking, southwest of London. Initially, people treat it as a curiosity, gathering to look at the strange object buried in a crater. The narrator and others approach peacefully, even trying to communicate with whatever might be inside. This peaceful first contact is shattered when the Martians emerge and immediately attack with a heat ray, a weapon that incinerates everything in its path. Dozens of people are killed instantly. This brutal introduction shows that the Martians have no interest in communication or peaceful coexistence. They have come to conquer and exterminate. Wells's description of the Martians is both detailed and disturbing. They are utterly alien, not humanoid, but more like massive brains in bulbous bodies with tentacles for manipulation. They have no digestive systems as humans understand them, but instead feed on the blood of other creatures, injecting it directly into their veins. They communicate through sounds like musical instruments rather than speech. They have large eyes, but apparently no sense of smell. Wells imagines them as beings who have evolved far beyond humans, having conquered disease and emotion, becoming pure intellect. However, this evolution has made them monstrous rather than enlightened. They are cold, logical, and completely indifferent to human suffering. Wells seems to be suggesting that pure rationality without emotion or morality leads to horror rather than progress. The Martian technology is far beyond anything humans possess in 1898. Their heat ray can destroy anything at a distance, reducing buildings to ash and vaporizing people instantly. They deploy a poisonous black smoke that kills anyone who breathes it. Most terrifyingly, they travel in tripod-fighting machines, towering mechanical walkers that stride across the countryside, crushing or burning everything in their path. Wells's description of these tripods has become iconic, inspiring countless imitations in later science fiction. The image of these enormous machines walking through London, destroying buildings with heat rays while their strange hooting calls echo across the ruins, creates an atmosphere of apocalyptic terror that remains powerful today. The human response to the invasion follows a pattern that Wells portrays as both realistic and damning. Initially, there is confusion and disbelief. The first reports of the massacre at Horsell Common are dismissed or misunderstood. When people realize the threat is real, there are attempts at military resistance. The British Army attacks the Martians with artillery, achieving some success in destroying several tripods. This creates false hope that human technology might be sufficient to defeat the invaders. However, the Martians adapt quickly, using their black smoke to devastating effect and overwhelming the military with their superior numbers and technology. The army is routed, and organized resistance collapses. This portrayal of military inadequacy must have been shocking and disturbing to Victorian readers, accustomed to stories of British military triumph. As the Martian advance continues, society breaks down rapidly. The narrator describes a mass exodus from London as millions of people flee the advancing aliens. This depiction of panicked refugees fleeing destruction was unprecedented in fiction and would become a standard element of disaster narratives. Wells shows how quickly civilization's veneer disappears under extreme stress. People fight each other for food, water, and space on trains. The rich have no special protection or privileges. Traditional authorities, like the police and government, are helpless. Everyone is reduced to the same desperate struggle for survival. This democratic apocalypse, where social class and status mean nothing in the face of overwhelming danger, reflects Wells' socialist sympathies and his critique of British class society. The narrator's journey through the devastated landscape provides the structure for the novel. After the initial attack, he tries to reach his wife, who is staying with relatives. He encounters various other survivors, each representing different responses to the catastrophe. One of the most important is the artilleryman, a soldier, who has survived the destruction of his unit. The artilleryman has grand plans for human resistance, imagining an underground civilization that will eventually rise up and defeat the Martians. His vision is both inspiring and delusional, full of brave talk, but lacking any practical basis. The narrator initially finds the artilleryman's ideas appealing, but gradually realizes they are fantasies. The artilleryman represents a very human tendency to cope with disaster through unrealistic dreams of heroic resistance rather than accepting harsh reality. Another crucial character is the curate, a clergyman who has a mental breakdown after witnessing the Martian massacre. The curate becomes increasingly unstable, alternating between religious despair and dangerous recklessness. He believes the Martians are divine punishment for human sin, and that resistance is futile. His faith, which should provide comfort and strength in crisis, instead leaves him paralyzed and irrational. Wells, who was skeptical of organized religion, uses the curate to critique how religious belief can fail people in actual crisis. The narrator's relationship with the curate becomes a life-or-death struggle when they are trapped together in a ruined house near a Martian landing site. The curate's noise threatens to alert the Martians to their presence, and the narrator is eventually forced to strike him unconscious to save himself. This brutal act shows how desperate circumstances can force even civilized people to commit violence. While trapped in the ruined house, the narrator has the opportunity to closely observe the Martians. He watches them through a crack in the wall as they go about their activities. He sees them feeding, handling humans they have captured, and operating their machines. These observations are both fascinating and horrifying. The Martians are methodical and efficient, treating humans like cattle or laboratory specimens. Wells describes how the Martians feed on human blood, capturing people and draining them. This vampiric element adds to the horror and may reflect Victorian anxieties about colonialism and exploitation. Just as Europeans extracted resources and labor from colonized peoples, the Martians extract life itself from humans. After days trapped in the house, the narrator emerges to find the Martian camp abandoned. He makes his way toward London, expecting to find the city in ruins and occupied by Martians. What he discovers instead is one of the most memorable scenes in science fiction. The Martians are dead, killed not by human weapons, but by bacteria. These alien invaders, with all their advanced technology and intelligence, have no immunity to Earth's microorganisms. They have been destroyed by the smallest and most primitive forms of life on our planet. Wells explains this ending through his narrator, noting that while humans evolved alongside Earth's bacteria and developed immunity, the Martians had no such defenses. They conquered Earth only to be defeated by invisible enemies they never knew existed. This ending is both scientifically sound and thematically perfect. Wells, with his biological training, understood that disease has shaped human history as much as any war or invention. The conclusion demonstrates that technological superiority and military might are not enough to guarantee survival. The Martians' defeat shows the importance of ecology and the complex relationships between organisms and their environments. It also deflates human pride. Humanity was not saved by courage, ingenuity, or military prowess. We were saved by accident, by the fortunate circumstance that Earth's bacteria were lethal to the invaders. This humbling conclusion reinforces the novel's theme about human limitations and the role of chance in survival. The aftermath of the invasion is portrayed realistically. The narrator returns to his home and is reunited with his wife. London begins to recover. However, the world has been permanently changed. The narrator describes how the invasion has shattered human complacency and forced people to recognize their vulnerability. The novel ends with the narrator reflecting on what has been learned from the invasion. He suggests that humans must be more humble about their place in the universe and more aware of their own capacity for cruelty. He also speculates about whether the Martians might try again, or whether other worlds might harbor intelligent life that could threaten Earth. The ending is not triumphant, but rather sobering and thoughtful. The themes of the War of the Worlds extend far beyond a simple invasion story. The most obvious theme is imperialism and its consequences. By showing Britain being colonized, Wells forces British readers to experience what their empire inflicted on others. The Martians' ruthless efficiency, their view of humans as inferior beings, and their exploitation of conquered people all mirror European colonial practices. Wells seems to be asking whether Britain has any right to complain about being treated as they have treated others. This critique of imperialism was bold for 1898, when the empire was at its height and most British people saw colonization as beneficial and morally justified. The novel also explores evolution and humanity's place in the natural order. Wells's Darwinian perspective shows humans not as special or protected, but as one species among many, subject to the same evolutionary pressures as any other organism. The Martians are more evolved in some ways, having developed greater intelligence and technology, but this does not make them superior in any absolute sense. Their lack of immunity to bacteria proves fatal, showing that evolution is about adaptation to specific environments rather than general superiority. The novel suggests that humans should not be arrogant about our position in nature because we are as vulnerable to extinction as any other species. Technology and its relationship to morality is another important theme. The Martians have incredible technology, but use it only for destruction and exploitation. They are intelligent, but not wise, powerful, but not moral. Wells seems to be warning that technological advancement without ethical development leads to horror. This theme was particularly relevant in Wells's time, when rapid industrialization and new weapons were changing warfare and society. The novel asks whether humans are using their growing technological power responsibly, or whether we are becoming like the Martians, capable of tremendous destruction, but lacking the wisdom to use our power well. The breakdown of social order under stress is portrayed in fascinating detail. Wells shows how quickly civilization structures collapse when the authorities cannot maintain order and basic needs cannot be met. The mass panic, the fighting over resources, and the emergence of opportunism and selfishness all feel realistic and are based on Wells's understanding of human psychology and history. However, Wells also shows instances of courage, kindness, and cooperation. The response to crisis brings out both the best and worst in humanity. This balanced view makes the novel more nuanced than simple disaster fiction. The scientific accuracy and speculation in The War of the Worlds are impressive for 1898. Wells's understanding of biology, physics, and engineering allows him to create aliens and technology that feel plausible rather than purely fantastical. He extrapolates logically from known science, imagining what Martian biology might be like if life evolved on a dying planet with less gravity and atmosphere. His heat ray is based on the idea of concentrated energy, anticipating lasers that would be invented decades later. His tripod machines anticipate mechanized warfare and robotics. While not all his speculations proved accurate, his method of building science fiction on scientific foundations influenced the genre's development and demonstrated that imaginative literature could be intellectually serious. The influence of The War of the Worlds on science fiction and popular culture is impossible to overstate. Wells essentially invented the alien invasion genre, creating the template that countless works have followed. The idea of hostile aliens with superior technology attacking Earth appears in endless books, films, and television shows. The image of Martian tripods has become iconic, appearing in everything from comic books to video games. The novel's structure, with ordinary people caught up in catastrophic events and struggling to survive while society collapses around them, has been used in countless disaster stories. Wells showed that science fiction could tackle serious themes while providing thrilling entertainment, elevating the genre from mere adventure stories to literature that explores important ideas. The 1938 radio adaptation of The War of the Worlds by Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater became one of the most famous broadcasts in history. Presented as a series of news bulletins interrupting regular programming, the adaptation convinced some listeners that an actual Martian invasion was occurring. Reports of panic, though probably exaggerated by newspapers, became part of the legend. This episode demonstrated the power of mass media and the public's vulnerability to convincing hoaxes. It also proved the enduring power of Wells's story, showing that it could terrify audiences 40 years after its publication. The 1938 panic became part of The War of the Worlds' legacy, often overshadowing the original novel. Later adaptations have interpreted The War of the Worlds in various ways, each reflecting its era's concerns. The 1953 film updated the story to contemporary America during the Cold War, with the Martian invasion functioning as an allegory for nuclear war and communist invasion. Steven Spielberg's 2005 film emphasized the 9/11 parallels, showing American cities under sudden attack and exploring themes of terrorism and trauma. A 2019 BBC television series relocated the action to Edwardian England and emphasized the period setting and social criticism. Each adaptation finds new relevance in Wells's story, demonstrating its flexibility and continuing resonance. The novel's prose style is efficient and powerful. Wells writes in clear, straightforward English, avoiding unnecessary ornamentation. His descriptions are vivid and specific, creating strong visual images in readers' minds. The tripod striding across the landscape, the red weed spreading across the devastated countryside, the empty streets of London strewn with debris and bodies, all these images stay with readers long after finishing the book. Wells also effectively conveys the narrator's emotional state, moving from curiosity to terror to despair to cautious hope. The first-person narration makes the experience immediate and personal, drawing readers into the narrator's journey. In conclusion, The War of the Worlds is a novel that revolutionized science fiction while also serving as serious social criticism. H.G. Wells created the alien invasion story, giving countless later writers and filmmakers a framework for exploring humanity's response to overwhelming threat. Through his Martian invaders, Wells critiqued British imperialism, human arrogance, and faith in technological progress. He showed how fragile civilization is and how quickly it can collapse under extreme stress. He demonstrated that humans are not special or protected, but are as vulnerable as any other species. At the same time, the novel is simply a gripping survival story, following one man's desperate attempt to stay alive and find his wife during an apocalypse. The War of the Worlds remains relevant because the questions it raises are timeless. How should we respond to overwhelming danger? What happens to society when normal structures and authorities fail? What are our moral obligations to others during catastrophe? How should we view our place in the universe and our relationship with other forms of life? Are we capable of learning from our mistakes and changing our behavior? These questions feel as urgent today as they did in 1898. We face different threats than Martian invaders, climate change, pandemics, nuclear weapons, but the fundamental challenges remain the same. Wells's novel reminds us that we are vulnerable, that we should not be arrogant about our power, and that survival often depends on factors beyond our control. The novel's ending, with bacteria rather than human action defeating the invaders, remains one of the most memorable and meaningful conclusions in science fiction. It demonstrates that nature operates by its own rules, indifferent to human needs and plans. It shows that the smallest and most overlooked things can be most important. It deflates heroic narratives about human triumph and forces us to acknowledge our dependence on the complex web of life that evolved with us. This ecological awareness was ahead of its time in 1898 and feels increasingly relevant as we confront environmental crises caused by our own actions. Wells understood that humans are part of nature, not separate from or above it, and that our fate is bound up with all other life on Earth. If you found this exploration of the War of the Worlds meaningful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into classic literature. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the novel's themes and its relevance today. What do you think Wells would say about our current relationship with technology and the environment? How does the novel's critique of imperialism apply to our world. If aliens did invade Earth tomorrow, do you think humanity would respond any better than the Victorians did in the novel? These questions matter because they force us to examine our values, our preparedness for crisis, and our place in the universe. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep exploring the great works that challenge our assumptions and expand our imagination. The universe is vast, and we are small. The War of the Worlds reminds us to never forget it.